Leader Colonel Gaddafi has once again appeared on state TV vowing to fight on. It comes after a series of blasts rocked the capital as the battle for the country continues. Gaddafi's reportedly regained control of two major cities in the northwest, while clashes have resumed over the oil-rich east. Meanwhile, the US is flexing its military muscles, moving its naval forces closer to Libya and triggering speculation of an invasion. The UK is also not ruling out the use of force. The Telegraph newspaper is claiming British special forces are already in the country. The Daily reports that the Pentagon is to call upon them to secure several tons of mustard gas and other potential chemical weapons thought to be stockpiled in Libya. With the international storms gathering over the country's leader, the UN suspended the country from the Human Rights Council. It also calls for a mass humanitarian evacuation for people caught up in the crisis. As world pressure mounts, RT's Laura Emmett reports on whether NATO's ready for a new war.
And we do not in any way rule out the use of military assets. We must not tolerate this regime using military force against its own people.
Is this history repeating itself? The British government getting the guns on standby as the country crumbles, vowing to impose a no-fly zone. In this case, Libya. In 2003, it was Iraq.
It's looking very dangerous. It's looking quite possible that they will launch such an attack with or without UN approval, and so we're looking almost at a repeat of what happened in Iraq, and indeed the results, I suspect, will be largely the same.
But not every country's getting that treatment, and Libya's not the only African nation in turmoil. Somalia's drawn-out conflict has been called a slow genocide, but there's little sign of US or European military input, and it's a similar story on the other side of the continent.
There are events unfolding right now in Ivory Coast, where there is also a conflict, an armed conflict between rebels and the government. But nobody seems to be thinking of that. It's only because fashionable attention is focused on Libya, oil, but also for the political implications of the Middle East as a whole. As we all know, the West, including my own country, Britain, has got its hands very dirty with the Libyan leadership over recent years.
Dirty with black gold. Libya has the largest proven oil reserves in Africa at more than 3% of the global total, and there could be a lot more undiscovered.
The only reason they're interested with Libya is about the oil. You hear anybody screaming and yelling about all those people last week that were killed in the Ivory Coast or the Sudan? I guess coca wasn't that, much of a national priority.
But in Somalia, there was precious little help while the body count rose over the years, except for one brief but disastrous intervention involving US soldiers. Immortalised in the movie Black Hawk Down, American forces failed at great cost to stabilise the country. They left quickly and haven't returned. And the lessons weren't learnt when it came to Iraq, which remains unstable even now, with only feeble shoots of that much vaunted democracy. Allied troops are equally bogged down in Afghanistan, with no convincing timeline for withdrawal and an ever-rising death toll.
It should be clear to an idiot that the mess that's been made in Afghanistan, the terrible disaster that was caused in Iraq, really shouldn't be visited on any more countries in the Middle East.
It's a model today's troubled African nations won't want imposed on them.
A puppet government which is still ruling by virtue of an American military occupation of Iraq. Really, that is not the kind of help that the revolutionaries throughout the Middle East need.
And American and European governments shouldn't look for backing at home either. Up to 1 million marched in London over the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and times have changed. This is now austerity Britain, where starting another war wasn't factored into the budget. British troops are already fighting an unpopular war in Afghanistan. It's highly unlikely the public has the appetite for again getting involved in someone else's struggle, battling as they are at home in the face of deep cuts and rising unemployment. And it's unlikely to be popular inside this building either. The Ministry of Defence has to slash spending by more than $7.5 billion in the next 4 years. It's an intervention Britain would find hard to afford on many levels. Laura Emmett, RT, London.